In a small, quiet town surrounded by lush green hills and winding roads, life moved at a slow pace. The people there were close-knit, always ready to lend a helping hand or share a warm meal when someone needed it. But even in such a peaceful place, tragedy can strike unexpectedly, leaving behind ripples of sorrow that touch everyone. Eleanor Thompson was the heart of her family. She wasn't just a mother, she was a friend, a guide, and a source of endless wisdom for her son, Daniel, and his younger sister, Lily. Her laughter filled their home, and her kindness made her a beloved figure in the community. So, when Eleanor passed away suddenly after a brief illness, the entire town felt the weight of her absence. It was as though a light had gone out, leaving everyone groping in the dark. The day of Eleanor's funeral was overcast with gray clouds hanging low in the sky. Friends, neighbors, and distant relatives gathered at the cemetery, their faces somber as they paid their final respects. Daniel stood near the grave, clutching his phone tightly in one hand. He hadn't let go of it since his mother's passing, because it contained so many precious memories. Photos of happier times, voice notes where Eleanor's soothing voice reminded him to stay strong, and videos of family gatherings where laughter echoed freely. As the priest spoke softly about Eleanor's life and legacy, Daniel found himself lost in thought. Memories flooded his mind. The way she used to hum while cooking dinner, how she would sit beside him late at night when he struggled with homework, and the countless times she told him he could achieve anything if he set his mind to it. Tears streamed down his face as he tried to hold himself together, but the pain was too much to bear. When the ceremony ended, people began to disperse slowly, offering hugs and condolences to Daniel and Lily. Overwhelmed by grief, Daniel barely noticed, as he absent-mindedly placed his phone on top of the casket. His hands trembled as he reached out to touch the polished wood one last time before turning away. The gravediggers waited patiently nearby, ready to lower the casket into the ground once everyone had left. Daniel walked back to his car like a man in a daze, his thoughts consumed by the enormity of his loss. By the time he got home, exhaustion had taken over, and he collapsed onto the couch without giving his phone another thought. For the next few days, he wandered through life mechanically, unable to focus on anything other than the void his mother's death had left behind. It wasn't until nearly a week later that Daniel realized something was wrong. He reached for his phone instinctively, only to find it missing. At first, he assumed he'd misplaced it somewhere in the house, so he began searching frantically. He checked under cushions, inside drawers, and even retraced his steps to places he'd visited recently. But no matter where he looked, the phone was nowhere to be found. Frustrated and worried, Daniel decided to call his service provider to block the SIM card. That's when things took an unexpected turn. The customer service representative informed him that the phone had been active recently, sending out signals despite being lost. Confused, Daniel asked for more details. The representative explained that the GPS location showed the phone moving intermittently, which didn't make sense for a device that should have been sitting idle wherever he'd dropped it. This revelation sent a chill down Daniel's spine. How could his phone still be operational? And why did its location seem to change? As he hung up the phone, his mind raced with possibilities. Had someone stolen it? Was it a technical glitch? Or was there something far stranger at play? Determined to get answers, Daniel turned to his best friend, Mark, who had a knack for technology. Together, they accessed the phone's tracking app and were stunned to see the signal pinpointing a location they knew all too well, the cemetery where Eleanor was buried. At first, they laughed it off, assuming it must be some kind of error. Phones don't work underground, after all. But when they refreshed the map multiple times and received the same result, doubt crept in. What if? Daniel hesitated, unsure whether to voice his growing suspicion. What if I accidentally dropped it into Mom's grave? Mark's eyes widened. You mean like during the funeral? Daniel nodded slowly, recalling the moment he'd placed his hand, and possibly his phone, on the casket. The idea seemed absurd, yet the evidence pointed unmistakably toward it. They stared at each other in silence, both grappling with the implications. That night, unable to sleep, Daniel sat alone in his room, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts were a whirlwind of emotions: guilt, fear, and a strange sense of curiosity. If the phone really was in his mother's grave, what did that mean? Could it still function after being buried? And if it somehow worked, what messages might it hold? The questions gnawed at him until he couldn't ignore them any longer. Grabbing a flashlight and a shovel from the garage, Daniel drove to the cemetery under the cover of darkness. The air was cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of earth and grass. As he approached the grave, his heart pounded in his chest. This was insane. What was he hoping to find? A working phone buried 6 feet underground, yet deep down he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to know the truth. Standing over the freshly dug earth, Daniel hesitated. He glanced around nervously, half expecting someone to appear and ask what he was doing. But the cemetery was deserted, silent except for the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Taking a deep breath, he plunged the shovel into the dirt and began to dig. Each scoop of soil felt heavier than the last, not just physically but emotionally. With every shovelful, Daniel confronted the reality of his mother's death anew. By the time he reached the casket, sweat dripped from his brow and his muscles ached. Carefully, he pried open the lid, bracing himself for what he might find. And then he saw it, the faint glow of his phone, resting atop the satin lining inside. The coffin. As Daniel stared at the glowing screen of his phone inside the coffin, his mind struggled to process what he was seeing. It wasn't just that the phone was there. It was the fact that it was still working. The device should have been dead, buried under layers of soil and encased in a wooden casket. Yet here it was, lighting up as if nothing unusual had happened. Notifications blinked across the screen, casting an eerie glow on the satin lining surrounding it. For a moment, Daniel froze, unsure whether to reach for the phone or step back. His heart raced, pounding so loudly he thought it might echo through the silent cemetery. He felt torn between disbelief and awe. Was this some kind of miracle? Or was his mind playing tricks on him, conjuring impossible scenarios because he desperately wanted to feel connected to his mother again? Summoning his courage, Daniel carefully picked up the phone. His hands trembled as he unlocked it, half expecting it to shut down immediately. But instead, the screen lit up brightly, displaying a flurry of activity. Messages from unknown numbers filled the notification bar, each one more cryptic than the last. There were texts like, "She's waiting, and you're not alone," along with missed calls and voicemail alerts. Nothing made sense, but everything seemed deliberate, as though someone, or something, was trying to communicate with him. Curiosity overtook fear, and Daniel tapped on the Messages app first. Most of the texts came from numbers he didn't recognize, but their content sent chills down his spine. One read, "Tell Lily she's brave." Another said, "The garden is blooming." These weren't random phrases. They were deeply personal, referencing things only his family would know. For instance, the garden had been Eleanor's pride and joy, a place where she spent countless hours planting flowers and herbs. And Lily, his younger sister, often doubted herself despite being incredibly resilient. How could anyone outside their inner circle know these details? But it was the voicemails that truly unnerved him. With shaking fingers, Daniel pressed play on the first recording. At first, all he heard was static, faint crackling sounds that reminded him of old radios tuning into distant stations. Then, amidst the noise, came a whisper. It was soft and indistinct, almost like wind brushing against leaves. But as he listened closer, he realized it sounded human. A second recording revealed laughter, gentle melodic chuckles that sent shivers running down his arms. They weren't menacing, they were comforting, yet undeniably strange. By the time he reached the third voicemail, Daniel's breath hitched in his throat. This one was different, clearer. As the message played, a voice emerged, one that stopped him cold. It was unmistakable, his mother's voice. She spoke softly, her tone warm and reassuring, just as it had always been during their conversations. "I'm okay, sweetheart," she said. "Don't cry anymore. I'm right here." Tears streamed down Daniel's face as he replayed the recording over and over, clinging to every word. It couldn't be real. Phones don't survive underground. Dead people don't leave voicemails. Yet here he was, holding proof that defied logic. Part of him wanted to believe it was some elaborate prank, but deep down, he knew better. No one else could imitate his mother's voice so perfectly, nor could they possibly know the intimate details mentioned in those messages. Overwhelmed, Daniel sat back against the edge of the grave, clutching the phone tightly. The night air grew colder, and the shadows around him seemed to stretch longer. He glanced around nervously, half expecting to see someone watching him. But the cemetery remained empty, save for the rustling trees and distant hoots of owls. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't entirely alone. When dawn broke, Daniel reluctantly left the cemetery, taking the mysterious phone with him. He drove home in silence, his mind racing with questions. What did it all mean? Why was this happening now? And most importantly, what was he supposed to do next? Back at home, Daniel decided to share his discovery with Mark, the only person he trusted enough to confide in. Sitting at the kitchen table, he explained everything: the digging, the glowing phone, the cryptic messages, and the chilling voicemails. Mark listened intently, his expression shifting from skepticism to genuine intrigue. When Daniel played the recording of his mother's voice, even Mark's doubts began to waver. This doesn't make any sense," Mark murmured, rubbing his temples. "Phones aren't built to function like this, especially not after being buried. Something else has to be going on." "What do you think it is?" Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mark hesitated before answering. "I don't know, man. Maybe I don't want to say it out loud, but maybe it's something beyond us, like maybe your mom's trying to reach out." Daniel nodded slowly, feeling both comforted and terrified by the idea. If it was true, if his mother was somehow communicating through the phone, it meant she wasn't completely gone. But how could such a thing even be possible? Science offered no explanation, and neither did common sense. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Word of Daniel's discovery eventually spread throughout the small town. People whispered about the glowing phone and the mysterious messages, speculating wildly about what it all meant. Some dismissed it as a hoax, accusing Daniel of fabricating the story to cope with his grief. Others believed wholeheartedly, seeing it as a sign of something divine or supernatural. Either way, the tale captured everyone's attention, drawing curious visitors to the cemetery and sparking debates in local cafes and churches. One day, a woman named Clara approached Daniel. She introduced herself as a medium, claiming she had been drawn to the story after sensing a powerful presence tied to the phone. Though initially hesitant, Daniel agreed to meet her at the cemetery, hoping she might provide answers. The visit was surreal. Standing near Eleanor's grave, Clara closed her eyes and took slow, deliberate breaths. After several minutes, she opened her eyes, looking visibly shaken. "There's someone here," she said softly. "A strong energy. She's using the phone as a bridge, a way to connect with you." "Who is it?" Daniel asked, though he already suspected the answer. "It's your mother," Clara replied. "She wants you to know she's at peace, but she's also worried about you and Lily. She says you need to take care of each other." The words hit Daniel like a tidal wave. He had spent weeks drowning in guilt and sadness, blaming himself for not being able to save his mother. Hearing that she was okay, and that she cared about him and Lily, brought a sense of relief he hadn't felt since her passing. Clara urged Daniel to keep the phone safe, warning that destroying it might sever the connection entirely. Whether it was truly a link to his mother or simply a manifestation of his grief, Daniel couldn't say for sure. But one thing was certain: the phone had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that love transcends even death. In the days that followed, Daniel continued to receive messages, though they grew fewer and farther between. Each one carried a sense of purpose, urging him to cherish memories, support his sister, and find strength in difficult times. Slowly but surely, he began to heal, finding solace in the knowledge that his mother's spirit lived on, not just in the phone, but in the lessons she had taught him and the love she had shared. Though the world remained divided on how to explain what happened, Daniel no longer cared about the skeptics or the doubters. To him, the glowing phone wasn't a mystery to solve. It was a gift, a lifeline to the woman who had shaped his life in ways no one else ever could. And for that, he was eternally grateful. Daniel's life had taken a turn into uncharted territory. The glowing phone, the cryptic messages, and the haunting yet comforting voice of his mother were no longer just strange occurrences. They had become part of his daily reality. Each day brought new developments, each one more perplexing than the last. While some people in town dismissed the story as an elaborate hoax or a coping mechanism fueled by grief, others believed it was something far greater, a glimpse into the unknown, a bridge between worlds. Word of the mysterious phone continued to spread like wildfire, drawing attention from beyond the small town. Local news outlets picked up the story, sensationalizing it with headlines like "The Phone That Won't Die" and "Messages from Beyond the Grave." Journalists flocked to the cemetery, hoping to catch a glimpse of Daniel or the infamous device. Some even tried to interview him, but he refused to speak publicly about it, still grappling with the enormity of what was happening. Despite the growing scrutiny, Daniel remained focused on understanding the phone's purpose. He began documenting everything meticulously, every message, every notification, every sound it emitted. He kept a journal where he wrote down timestamps, descriptions, and his own interpretations of the events. It wasn't just curiosity driving him. It was a deep-seated need to make sense of his mother's apparent presence in his life. If she truly was reaching out, he wanted to ensure he didn't miss a single word. One evening, as Daniel sat at his kitchen table reviewing the latest entries in his journal, Mark walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You're obsessing over this," Mark said gently, placing 1 cup in front of Daniel. "I get it, you want answers, but you can't let it consume you." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not obsession, Mark. I don't know how else to describe it. Every time I think I figured something out, another message comes in, and it throws everything off balance again." Mark nodded sympathetically. "Fair enough. But have you thought about sharing this with someone who might actually understand? Like that medium, Clara?" Daniel hesitated. Meeting Clara had been unsettling, but her words had resonated deeply. She had spoken of a bridge connecting him to his mother, a concept that both terrified and comforted him. Still, the idea of inviting her, or anyone else, into this intimate experience felt invasive. This was his connection to Eleanor, fragile and sacred, and he feared exposing it to judgment or ridicule. "I'm not ready for that," Daniel admitted finally. "Not yet." Mark didn't push further, sensing the weight of Daniel's emotions. Instead, they spent the rest of the evening discussing less intense topics, trying to distract themselves from the looming mystery. But when Daniel returned to his room later that night, the glow of the phone caught his eye from its spot on the bedside table. Its screen lit up briefly, displaying another unread message. Against his better judgment, he reached for it. The message was short but chilling. "Come to the garden." Daniel stared at the text, his pulse quickening. The garden, it could only mean one place. Eleanor's beloved backyard sanctuary, filled with vibrant flowers and herbs she had nurtured for years. Since her passing, the garden had fallen into disrepair, overtaken by weeds and neglect. Neither Daniel nor Lily had found the strength to tend to it, as doing so would feel too much like saying goodbye all over again. But now, staring at those 3 simple words, Daniel felt compelled to visit the garden. Something about the message carried an urgency he couldn't ignore. Grabbing a flashlight, he slipped out of the house and made his way to the backyard. The garden looked different under the moonlight. Shadows danced across the tangled vines and wilting blooms, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere. Daniel moved, slowly, shining the flashlight around until something caught his eye. A faint glow emanating from beneath a cluster of rose bushes. His breath hitched as he knelt down and parted the branches carefully. There, nestled among the roots, was a small, Object wrapped in cloth. Heart pounding, Daniel unwrapped it to reveal an old locket, a keepsake he hadn't seen since childhood. Inside the locket was a faded photograph of Eleanor holding a young Daniel in her arms. On the back of the locket, engraved in delicate script, were the words, "Always with you." Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes as he clutched the locket tightly. It was impossible. There was no way it could have ended up here unless someone had placed it deliberately. And yet no one else knew about the significance of the locket or its connection to Eleanor. Could it really be her doing? Before he could process what he'd found, his phone buzzed again. Another message appeared. "Take care of it. For me. Cordedoar. Night." Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay awake, clutching the locket and replaying the events in his mind. Was his mother guiding him somehow, leading him to rediscover pieces of their shared past? Or was his imagination spiraling out of control, conjuring meaning where none existed? Either way, the experience left him feeling closer to Eleanor than he had in weeks. The next morning, Daniel decided to share the discovery with Lily. She had been distant since their mother's death, retreating into herself and avoiding conversations about Eleanor altogether. Daniel understood her pain. It mirrored his own. But he also knew she needed to confront it eventually. Perhaps the locket could help bring them together. Lily was sitting on the porch steps when Daniel approached her, the locket resting in his palm. At first she looked confused, then startled as recognition dawned on her face. "Where did you find that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "In the garden," Daniel replied. "It showed up last night." Lily took the locket from him, tracing the engraving with trembling fingers. "Mom used to wear this every day," she murmured. "She said it reminded her of us." They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their thoughts. Finally, Lily spoke. Do you think she's still watching over us?" Daniel hesitated before answering. He didn't want to burden Lily with the full extent of his experiences, the glowing phone, the cryptic messages, the voicemails, but he also didn't want to lie to her. "I think she's trying to tell us something," he said carefully. "Maybe she wants us to remember the good times, to keep her memory alive." Lily nodded, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in weeks, she leaned into Daniel, letting him wrap his arms around her. In that moment, they weren't just siblings grieving separately. They were a team, united by love and loss. As the days passed, Daniel noticed subtle changes in the messages he received. They became less frequent but more meaningful, often referencing specific memories or encouraging him to take action. One message read, "Fix the garden." Another said, "Talk to Lily more." Each directive nudged him toward healing, pushing him to rebuild not just the physical spaces Eleanor had cherished, but also the relationships she had nurtured. With Lily's help, Daniel began restoring the garden. Together, they cleared away the weeds, replanted flowers, and trimmed the overgrown bushes. It was hard work, both physically and emotionally, but it also brought them closer. As they worked side by side, they shared stories about Eleanor, funny anecdotes, heartfelt moments, and lessons she had taught them. The garden became a living tribute to her, a place where her spirit seemed to linger in every bloom and leaf. Meanwhile, the phone continued to serve as a conduit for communication, though its activity slowed significantly. Daniel stopped obsessing over decoding every message and instead embraced the uncertainty. Whether it was truly his mother reaching out or simply his subconscious manifesting her voice, it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the impact it had on his life, the way it reminded him to cherish the present, honor the past, and look forward to the future. The townspeople remained divided in their opinions, but Daniel paid little attention to them. Some visited the garden to see the transformation for themselves, marveling at how vibrant and alive it felt despite its recent neglect. Others whispered about curses or divine intervention, speculating endlessly about the source of the mysterious messages. Daniel tuned it all out, focusing instead on the tangible changes in his own life. By the time winter arrived, the garden was thriving once again. Snow blanketed the ground, but beneath it lay the promise of spring, a testament to resilience and renewal. Daniel stood in the middle of the garden, the locket hanging around his neck and the phone tucked safely in his pocket. He felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that Eleanor's legacy lived on, not just in the objects she had left behind, but in the love she had instilled in her children. Though the mystery of the glowing phone remained unsolved, Daniel no longer sought answers. Instead, he chose to embrace the wonder of it all, finding beauty in the inexplicable and strength in the connections that transcended even death. As winter deepened, the small town settled into its usual rhythm of quiet routines and frosty mornings. Life moved forward as it always does. But for Daniel and Lily, the months since their mother's passing had been anything but ordinary. The glowing phone, the cryptic messages, and the inexplicable discoveries tied to Eleanor's memory had woven themselves into the fabric of their lives. What started as a bizarre mystery had transformed into something far more profound, a journey of healing, connection, and rediscovery. Daniel found himself spending more time in the garden, even as the cold weather made it less inviting. There was something comforting about being surrounded by the plants his mother had loved so dearly. Each flower seemed to carry a piece of her spirit, whispering stories of resilience and growth. He often sat on the wooden bench they had built together years ago, staring at the locket that now hung around his neck. It was a constant reminder of Eleanor's presence, both tangible and intangible. One chilly afternoon, as Daniel tended to a patch of lavender, his phone buzzed in his pocket. By now, the device had become almost an extension of him, always close at hand. Pulling it out, he saw yet another message waiting. "The stars will guide you tonight." He frowned, puzzled by the words. What did they mean? The phrase felt poetic, almost mystical, but also frustratingly vague. Still, there was something about it that resonated with him, stirring a sense of anticipation. For reasons he couldn't explain, Daniel decided to trust the message. That night, bundled in a thick coat and scarf, he ventured outside to gaze at the sky. The air was crisp, and the stars shone brightly against the dark expanse above. Daniel climbed onto the roof of the shed at the edge of the property, a spot where he and Eleanor used to sit during summer nights to stargaze. As a child, she would point out constellations, weaving tales about heroes, gods, and mythical creatures. Those moments had sparked his lifelong fascination with the night sky. Lost in thought, Daniel traced the familiar patterns of Orion and Cassiopeia when something unusual caught his eye. A faint light flickered near the horizon. Not a plane or satellite, but something softer, almost ethereal. It pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat before fading away completely. Just as suddenly his phone buzzed again. This time the message read, "She sees you." A lump formed in Daniel's throat. His chest tightened as emotions surged within him. Was this some kind of cosmic coincidence? Or was his mother truly watching over him through the stars? Didn't have answers, but the feeling of being connected to something greater than himself was undeniable. In that moment, under the vast, glittering sky, Daniel felt closer to Eleanor than ever before. The next morning, Daniel shared the experience with Lily over breakfast. She listened quietly, her expression thoughtful. When he finished speaking, she said softly, "Mom always loved stargazing. Remember how she used to say the stars were like little pieces of heaven?" Daniel nodded, smiling faintly. "Yeah, I remember." Lily hesitated before adding, "Do you think maybe she's using them to talk to us, like guiding you to look up last night?" It was a question neither of them could answer definitively, but the idea lingered between them. Over the following days, they began paying closer attention to the world around them, the way sunlight filtered through the trees, the sound of wind rustling leaves, the patterns of frost on window panes. They started noticing small signs everywhere, things they might have overlooked before. A bird perched on the windowsill, chirping cheerfully. a stray cat curling up on the porch steps. Even the scent of rain carried a sense of familiarity, as if Eleanor were leaving subtle reminders of her love. Meanwhile, the glowing phone continued to deliver sporadic messages, each one nudging Daniel toward reflection and action. One evening, as he scrolled through old photos on the device, a notification popped up. Remember the letters. Confused, Daniel racked his brain trying to recall what the message referred to. Letters? His mother hadn't written many, at least. Not recently. But then he remembered, decades ago when Eleanor first became a mother, she had started writing letters to her children. She called them time capsules, intending to give them to Daniel and Lily when they grew older. Somewhere along the way, life got busy, and the tradition faded. Determined to uncover these forgotten treasures, Daniel rummaged through the attic the next day. Boxes upon boxes filled with family memorabilia lined the dusty space. After hours of searching, he finally found what he was looking for, a tin box labeled "Letters for My Babies." Inside were dozens of envelopes, each addressed either to Daniel or Lily, dated from different periods of their lives. Tears welled up in his eyes as he opened the first letter. Written in Eleanor's neat handwriting, it began, "Dear Daniel, today is your 5th birthday and I just watched you blow out the candles on your cake. You look so proud and I couldn't stop smiling. I want you to know how special you are, my sweet boy. No matter what happens in life, never forget that you are loved beyond measure." Each letter painted a vivid picture of their childhood, capturing milestones, struggles, and triumphs. Some were funny, recounting silly antics. Others were heartfelt, offering advice and encouragement. Reading them felt like having a conversation with Eleanor herself, hearing her voice echo through the pages. When Daniel showed the letters to Lily, she burst into tears. "I can't believe she kept doing this," she whispered. "Even when we were teenagers and acted like we didn't need her." Together they spent hours poring over the letters, laughing and crying as memories flooded back. It was as though Eleanor had left behind a roadmap of her love, ensuring her children would never feel lost without her. The discovery brought them even closer, strengthening the bond they had begun rebuilding in the garden. As word of these new developments spread, curiosity about the glowing phone reached new heights. People who had once dismissed the story as fiction now approached Daniel with questions, eager to understand the phenomenon. Some sought comfort in the idea that loved ones could communicate from beyond the grave, while others remained skeptical, insisting there must be a logical explanation. One evening, a local journalist named Sarah visited Daniel at home. Unlike the others who had come seeking sensational headlines, Sarah seemed genuinely interested in understanding the emotional impact of the experience. Over cups of tea, she asked thoughtful questions, listening intently as Daniel recounted the events leading up to the discovery of the letters. "You've been through so much," Sarah said gently. "Do you think finding these letters has helped you heal?" Daniel considered the question carefully. "I think it's part of the process," he replied. "The phone, the messages, the garden, it's all connected somehow. Whether it's Mom reaching out or just my mind finding ways to cope, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that it's helping me remember her and reminding me to keep living for her." Sarah nodded, scribbling notes in her notebook. Her article, published a few days later, focused less on the supernatural aspects of the story and more on the human elements: grief, love, and the enduring power of memory. To Daniel's surprise, it resonated deeply with readers, sparking conversations about loss and healing across the community. Despite the growing attention, Daniel and Lily chose to shield themselves from the chaos. They focused instead on nurturing their relationship and honoring Eleanor's legacy. Together, they organized a small gathering in the garden, inviting friends and neighbors to celebrate her life. They decorated the space with lanterns and fairy lights, creating a warm, inviting atmosphere. As guests arrived, they shared stories about Eleanor, laughter mingling with tears, as everyone remembered the woman who had touched so many lives. At the center of the celebration stood a makeshift shrine, a table adorned with photographs, the tin box of letters, and the locket Daniel had found in the garden. Nearby, the glowing phone rested inside a glass case, its screen dimmed but still holding untold mysteries. For Daniel and Lily, it symbolized not just the unknown, but also the unbreakable bond they shared with their mother. As the night drew to a close, Daniel took a moment to stand alone in the garden. Looking up at the stars, he whispered, "Thank you, Mom, for everything." Though the journey was far from over, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. The glowing phone might remain a mystery, but its true significance lay in the connections it had reignited, not just with Eleanor, but with himself, his sister, and the world around him. And in those connections he found peace. As spring approached, the once frosty mornings gave way to warmer days, and the garden that Daniel and Lily had worked so hard to restore began to bloom in earnest. The vibrant colors of tulips, daisies, and marigolds painted the backyard with life, mirroring the gradual healing taking place within their hearts. Yet despite the beauty surrounding them, the glowing phone remained an enigma, a constant reminder of the unresolved questions lingering in their minds. The messages had grown even more sporadic, appearing only a few times a week now. But each one carried weight, as though Eleanor was guiding her children through specific moments rather than overwhelming them with constant communication. One morning, as Daniel sipped his coffee at the kitchen table, the phone buzzed softly. He glanced down at the screen, expecting another cryptic phrase or directive. Instead, he saw something entirely unexpected. Daniel frowned, puzzled. What song? He scrolled through his music library, searching for any tracks his mother might have referenced. Nothing stood out. Then it hit him, the old cassette player tucked away in the attic. Eleanor had always loved playing tapes of her favorite songs during family gatherings, insisting that vinyl and cassettes held a warmth digital formats lacked. Could this message be pointing him toward those forgotten recordings? Curiosity piqued. Daniel climbed up to the attic once again. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the small window as he rummaged through boxes until he found the familiar black cassette player. Beside it lay a stack of tapes, each labeled neatly, in Eleanor's handwriting. Some were marked with names of artists, the Carpenters, Simon and Garfunkel, Fleetwood Mac, while others simply read, Family Mix, or Special Memories. He plugged in the player and inserted the first tape labeled Family Mix. As the soft hum of static faded, a melody filled the room. It was Moon River, a song Eleanor used to sing while cooking dinner. Her voice wasn't on the recording, but the tune itself brought back floods of memories. Daniel closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. For a brief moment, it felt like she was right there beside him, humming along. When the song ended, Daniel noticed something odd. The phone buzzed again. Another message appeared. Intrigued, he switched to the next tape, titled Special Memories. This one started with a crackle before a voice came through. Not a singer, but Eleanor herself. She sounded younger, her tone playful and full of energy. "Hi, my darlings," her voice rang out. "If you're hearing this, it means I'm probably not around anymore. But don't cry. I want you to remember all the good times we shared. So here's a little gift. A collection of songs that remind me of you both." The recording shifted into a playlist of songs, each accompanied by a short commentary from Eleanor. For example, before playing Bridge Over Troubled Water, she said, "This one's for Daniel. Whenever you feel lost, just know there's always a bridge waiting to help you cross. You're stronger than you think." Tears streamed down Daniel's face as he listened. Each track was paired with a heartfelt message, tailored specifically to him and Lily. By the time the tape ended, he felt as though he'd spent an entire afternoon talking to his mother. The experience left him overwhelmed but grateful, as if Eleanor had reached across time and space to offer comfort and guidance. Later that evening, Daniel shared the discovery with Lily. They sat together in the living room, the cassette player between them, as they listened to the recordings. Hearing their mother's voice sparked a mix of emotions: joy, nostalgia, and bittersweet longing. When the final song ended, Lily turned to Daniel, her eyes shining with tears. "She did this on purpose," Lily said softly. "She must have known somehow." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, I think she did. Maybe she wanted us to find these things when we needed them most." The realization deepened their connection to Eleanor and reinforced the idea that her presence was still woven into the fabric of their lives. It wasn't just about the messages or the glowing phone, it was about the love and care she had poured into every detail, ensuring her legacy would endure long after she was gone. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and Lily made it a habit to listen to the tapes regularly. Each session felt like revisiting cherished memories, grounding them in the warmth of their mother's affection. At the same time, the glowing phone continued to deliver occasional messages, often referencing events or people from their childhood. One day it displayed a simple yet poignant instruction. Grandma, their maternal grandmother, had passed away years earlier, leaving behind a quaint cottage nestled near a lake. The siblings hadn't been there since her death, partly because it was too far away and partly because it held painful memories of loss. But the message felt like a nudge they couldn't ignore. On a sunny Saturday morning, Daniel and Lily packed a bag and drove to the cottage. As they pulled into the driveway, they were struck by how unchanged it looked. The white picket fence still surrounded the property, and the flower beds overflowed with wildflowers just as Grandma had kept them. Stepping inside felt surreal. The air smelled faintly of lavender, a scent that instantly transported them back to summer vacations spent baking cookies and skipping stones by the lake. Exploring the house, they stumbled upon a locked trunk in the attic. After some searching, they found the key hidden beneath a loose floorboard, a trick Grandma had taught them as kids. Inside the trunk, they discovered photo albums, handwritten journals, and a bundle of letters tied with ribbon. Among the items was a note addressed to Eleanor written in Grandma's elegant script. "To my dearest Ellie, if you ever need strength, look to the stars. They'll guide you home, just as they guided me. Love always, Mom." The words sent shivers down their spines. It was eerily similar to the message Daniel had received months earlier. "The stars will guide you tonight." Was this a coincidence? Or was there a deeper thread connecting their family across generations? The discovery added another layer of mystery to the unfolding story, hinting at a lineage of resilience and faith passed down through the women in their family. Back home, Daniel and Lily spent hours poring over the contents of the trunk. The journals revealed snippets of Grandma's life, her struggles, triumphs, and unwavering belief in the power of hope. The letters exchanged between her and Eleanor painted a vivid picture of their bond, highlighting themes of unconditional love and support. Reading them felt like piecing together a puzzle, uncovering truths that transcended their immediate understanding of grief and loss. Meanwhile, the glowing phone remained silent for several days, almost as if giving them space to process everything. When it finally buzzed again, the message was simple yet profound. At first, Daniel wasn't sure what it meant, but as he reflected on the journey they had embarked upon, the garden, the letters, the tapes, the visit to Grandma's house, he began to see a pattern. Each discovery had illuminated a piece of their past, shedding light on who they were and where they came from. The phone, whether supernatural or symbolic, served as a beacon, guiding them toward healing and self-discovery. Inspired by the message, Daniel decided to create a lantern memorial for Eleanor. Using glass jars, candles, and photos printed from the albums, he crafted a series of lanterns that represented different aspects of her life. One featured images of the garden, another showcased family portraits, and a third included lyrics from the songs she loved. Together, they formed a luminous tribute that glowed softly in the evenings, casting warm light throughout the backyard. Lily joined him in completing the project, adding her own touches to the lanterns. When they lit them for the first time, standing side by side under the starlit sky, they felt a profound sense of closure. The glowing phone may have sparked their journey, but it was their shared effort to honor Eleanor's memory that truly brought them peace. Though the mystery of the phone remained unsolved, its role in their lives had shifted. It was no longer a source of confusion or fear. It was a catalyst for transformation, a tool that had helped them reconnect with their roots and embrace the future with courage. And as they stood in the garden, surrounded by flickering lanterns and blooming flowers, Daniel whispered a silent thank you to his mother. Whether through stars, songs, or a glowing screen, her love continued to shine brightly, lighting their path forward.